Good evening. I'd like to call the Facilities Master Plan Committee for April 28th, 2021, 6 p.m. to order. My name is Jim Negron. I'm the chair. Misty, would you like to do the roll call?
Yep. Chair Negron.
Here.
Mike Alcock.
Here.
Lee Cole. Lee Cole, are you here? I see her. Okay. Manny Clark.
Here.
Sinai Hanks.
Here.
Stephen Hardwick.
Here.
Madison Hughes.
Here.
Thomas Knotzman.
Here.
Charity Martin King. D. Medina Cortez. Jawanza Moore.
Here.
Carl Moore Jr.
Here.
Safi Nioki.
Here.
Hafsa Musa. Margarita Ravilla. Delena Scales.
Here.
Julia Lynn Walker.
Here.
Cecily Wanjama.
Here.
Tiffany White.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Misty. Well, first and foremost, I'd like to thank Jennifer Adair, President Adair, Dr. Dixon, our co-chairs, our regional co-chairs, our student ambassadors, staff, community members at large. You know, as we embark on this facilities master plan, you know, my name is Jim Negron. I'm a community volunteer just like everyone here. So as I try to lead this group, just realize that I'm human and the imperfection of humanity comes out in things like this. But the most important thing is what we're embarking on is so important, not just to this group. It's important to the district, but it's important to the students that will attend and become leaders in our community for, you know, several decades. There are a few rules that I think are really important. One is there's no idea that's not important for us to hear. Okay, it's very important that we collect all thoughts, but as we do that, there are going to be things that are pertinent and things that are not pertinent to the task at hand. And for other committees that I've led, we've utilized what we call a parking lot. So as we collect ideas, the ones that, you know, may be relevant but not relevant to the topic at hand, what we'll do is we'll put those in the parking lot. And what I commit to everyone here is at some point we will be addressing the parking lot issues so that no one feels like their comments or thoughts are not going to be heard. But we, because we have such a large task at hand, and it's important for us to stay focused, but it's also important to collect everybody's ideas. We'll use that methodology to hopefully navigate our way through this. And I look forward to hearing everyone's comments. You know, like the other community volunteers, this is very important. You know, I'm an inner city dude. I'm passionate about the inner city. I'm passionate about the young, bright minds that are in our schools. And, you know, I really look forward to working on something that will really transform, you know, our vision and facilities inside the district. So with that being said, I'd like to turn this over to Patrick. Oh, I'm sorry, President Adair, sorry.
That's okay. You're doing great, Jim. Thank you so much for being our chair of this very esteemed committee. I'm going to thank all of our community volunteers, our students, our family reps, our, everyone who's really involved in this process. This is different, right? It's different than the way we've done facility master planning before. And that was very intentional on our part. We are really excited about now the unveiled portrait of a graduate. And we worked really hard as a community on that. And we know that in order to really accomplish it, we have to have facilities that match our vision. And so that's really what we're pushing ourselves to do. And you hold the key to all of the amazing ideas and innovation. And you are bringing that forward together, representing your regions in a way that we can ensure that as we continue with planning and figure out how we're going to accomplish these things, we have equity at the forefront and all regions and voices are represented. And so just like Jim said, no idea is a bad idea. We need dreams, we need vision. And I'm just so excited tonight to listen about how your community conversations went in round one. And I know that you're going to be out there, you have a couple more to go. And I'm just really excited. And so my job tonight is to just listen with open ears and make sure that I am here to support all of you. And again, I just want to say thank you for volunteering your time and talent and desire really to see our district be the best it can be for our students and community. So with that, I guess I'll turn it over to Dr. Dixon, who also has a welcome.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. And again, let me begin by just thanking the Facilities Master Plan Committee for this critical year-long endeavor that we're starting. As Jennifer stated, it's just important that we, as the largest school district in Ohio, that the community play a role in determining the outcomes that we want for our students and how our buildings and the facilities will support those goals. And so we ask ourselves all the time, what should those learning places look like? So last week, the FMP committee, they started the planning process. The feedback of the community is what we want. We want to hear from the community. We do not want to do this work in isolation. And I am a believer in the power of engagement and that quest for more knowledge. So whether you're a student, and I see some student faces here, a teacher, an administrator, you're asking the right questions and ask more questions. Put yourself in a position to learn more and gain knowledge. And that's exactly what is happening during the first round of our community conversations. And all the questions that we've heard so far have been so thought-provoking. They're asking, like, how do we, renovate schools to gain more success for our students? And what are those financial responsibilities? How do we build buildings to create spaces for students that English is not their first language? How do we bring modern technology courses to our school buildings? You're asking the right questions. And so I'm just excited. Just like Jennifer, I'm here to listen. It's been hard for me not to attend the other meetings, but you have to let the process unfold. And so I just encourage you to keep going. These buildings are for our youth. They're for kids who are not here now. Our elementary students, what do we want for them? And so I'm excited. So thank you again. I'm here to listen, as Jennifer stated, and I just appreciate your time and your commitment to make sure that we get this right. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dixon. That was very, very well said. One of the things that I tell people when I work on buildings is the quality of facilities should match the quality of institution. And the thing that I'm the most proud of is our ability to get the facilities up to the level of quality of institution so that we can inspire these young minds. So thank you. Thank you very much, and President Adair. With that, now I can turn it over to Dennis. Second time, Dennis. You get two. You're twice as important. I get to do it twice. So.
Well, President Adair, Dr. Dixon, thank you very much for the introduction. You actually took a lot of work off my shoulders already with those speeches, so I truly appreciate your words. Something that I've asked to do prior to us jumping into the recap was, why this process? There were some questions that while we were going through these community engagement sessions, and they're worth asking, is we know what's wrong. Why are we doing this? Why this seems irrelevant? What is the purpose of asking these ambiguous questions when all we want to know is if how schools are going to be moving or what spaces we're going to be adding? Well, to steal some of Dr. Dixon's verbiage, this is the largest district in the state. When you just try and put your head around the fact, how do we fundamentally change what these facilities are to encompass this new vision? That's drinking from a fire hose. You can't do it. You can't do it systematically. You can't do it directly. You can't do it objectively. And you can't do it with an air of transparency that everyone trusts. Where are we coming from? We don't know. If we don't, we know where we need to go. That's what the vision was. That's what the vision does. The vision is out there, so we know where we need to go. But where are we coming from? And what do we need to do? So we've examined from a fundamental basis. So that's what the point of the gather session was. And each of those items, and you'll notice that several of the groups, as we were talking, we talked about the 2 questions, and honestly, the feedback was tremendous. So all of you, I applaud your efforts for extracting the information we got. And I've got, I believe, 8 pages worth of notes between the Google Docs and my own notes and my team's notes of information that I didn't have before, that we didn't have before. So think about, this is where we're starting. And then as we were going along with the conversations, some of it turned into half of the next step, that envision phase. Okay, we know what we don't like, but we know what are our hopes and dreams? What's out there that we know we want to encapsulate to put in these facilities? And then we talked about the define portion. And what we mean by that is in the upcoming months, as we talk about what we want these spaces to be and how we want our teachers to teach and our learners to learn, and how as architects, and Jim could say as builders, how we help encapsulate those words in physical form, we still have so much to learn and so far to go. So yes, it is a long process, but we have to remain objective, transparent with that vision in mind, and to keep it step by step, slowly, methodically. And that's why we started this now, with the end all vision being completed, if you will, by this time of next year. That's a long time. So if you think of some of the questions, one of the questions that we got in the write-up in the Google Doc was, are we closing schools? How could you possibly answer that question now when we just got the vision of how we want these schools to look? So you think about all of the steps of where are we now to the 6 items that were on that portrait of a graduate. We have to make this we have to be patient, we have to be understanding, and we have to be methodical and transparent with how we gather the information. So with that being said, I have my intention for this evening was that as we go region by region, and we organized it in the order of which we had our community forums. And I have a 2-second summary because there were some overarching items that I've gathered from each of the groups. And then I would like to have some reflection from the group as we go through the regions, so they can give some of their reflections and some of their comments. And just in the ire of saving time, in the guise of saving time, I'm trying to encapsulate a lot of what I've heard as we move forward through the regions. First off, President Adair and Dr. Dixon, as I have to say, you please be proud of yourselves and of your staff. Every single group in every single region talked about the overwhelming positive was the staff involvement, the teacher involvement, the resiliency, the adapting to change, and how the students are so welcoming back into these buildings. All in all, you have community, you have neighbors, there's love in these buildings, and congratulations for that. Secondly, the major overall, the next one is the availability of pathways and choices. So from a curriculum standpoint, the idea that these things are out there and available is a definite positive for teaching and learning for students within the district. One of the negatives going through that is that they're not available in every region, and they're not available from building to building in these neighborhood schools. So there might be some opportunities for us to look at how the pathways are organized. Since we've come back to school, an overarching compliment was the improvement of communication. And whether that's through technology, whether that's through the needing to communicate, now that we're back to being able to be with each other, that was an overarching improvement. And the last major positive that almost every group in every region talked about was the absolute pride of cultural and ethnic diversity within each of the communities. And then how do we use that to our advantage? How do we know we have all of these different learners. How do we create a facility that encapsulates the joy of all of those cultures, the diversity of those cultures, the differences, and create an environment so everyone who is different is excited to learn within the facility? And again, we can't answer that question, but it was something that we thought was a challenge that was brought to us. And then again, overarching when it comes to the challenges, the inequity of facility improvements, whether it be systematically a roof, windows, security, the capital improvements, that was brought to our attention. And this is a facilities discussion, so that is fair. And then the lacking of the intervention in sensory spaces. So those intimate spaces that we know we need, and that we know that it's found out that we don't have all of them yet. Pardon me, 1 second. Pardon me. Specifically now, starting with Region 5, 2 points that came up was the fact that there are updated labs and systems, and the students feel valued and safe. That was something that was brought up throughout the comments of Region 5. And one of the challenges or the barriers that was discussed specifically for Region 5 was the inconsistent grade banding. That was something that, is it a problem, or is it because it was very unique to Region 5? So so from that, I hand it over to our co-chairs for Region 5.
Okay, good evening, everyone. How are you? My name is Tiffany White. I am one of the co-chairs for Region 5. Dennis, I think you summed it up really well. There were concerns about not having windows and sunlight and that social emotional piece with just feeling zen, I suppose. But the other thing that I didn't hear you say, but maybe you will in one of the other sessions, was having a space not only where teachers can take a moment, but also when kids may need to do that as well. Coming from isolation and then going back into a classroom setting sometimes can overstimulate some kids, and instead of them going to timeout, maybe just a place where they can just sit and gather themselves and collect themselves. I think that I was also a participant because I'm a parent as well. So that was another conversation that we had in another group that I was in.
Thank you. Anything else from Region 5? Okay. All right, on to Region 2. Specifically, there was a positive about early learning engagement and the family and diversity and the interaction. Again, talking about exemplifying and really showing pride in the fact and having joy in the diversity. That was something that was really brought up. For the challenges for Region 2, the idea that some of the important larger spaces do not have spaces, meaning music on a cart. That was something that was thought of as very much. And then there was a challenge with the negative aesthetic. And I think that has a lot to do with the traditional school architecture, that there were some ideas that could seem as a barrier, that are not very welcoming place for learning. So, oh, and I'm sorry, I missed one note of mine. The ESL program was known as very much of a positive, that within Region 2, that was something that, and I know that was discussed throughout, but that seemed as we were going through our notes that Region 2 really wanted to bring to light the positive of the ESL. Anybody from Region 2?
Yes, I'll start. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, one of the things that I did learn from Region 2 was what you mentioned is community pride. All of the schools in Region 2 seem to have some sort of community pride into where the community is willing to buy into the schools with just an opportunity of more involvement. So the more that they kind of know about what's going on inside the school, the more that the community has a willingness to buy in. Another one was facilities. I'm pretty sure all of the schools in Region 2, minus Doc West School, shared about they needed to be updated or modernized, as well as the school, and also the athletic facilities are very outdated at all of the schools. Some have already even mentioned having mold inside of the athletic facilities, inside the football stadiums, and that can also create more hazardous health towards our kids. And also we want to kind of show them that they concern just as much as our OCC kids, and getting them possibly some modernized facilities, modernized weight room, modernized gymnasiums to match kind of what's going on right now. And then the other thing was just finding out what the schools need and trying to tie that in with some of the businesses inside of the community. So we may be able to match these particular businesses up with the school to kind of off-shield some of these different particular needs that the schools need or the students needs.
Thanks, Jawanza. As the fellow to Region 2, to my friend Jawanza Moore, one of the other things that a positive was with disability services. There were a lot of positive comments about educators in the early learning phase. I think that was kind of indicated, but I wanted to emphasize that in relationship to disability services, heard some really great things in that area. I want to make sure that teachers and educators, administrators get the proper acknowledgement for that. But there was some discussion about, as we got into the middle school and high schools, the resources seemed to wane in regard to spaces and how integrated education and social emotional learning is happening at the middle school and high school level. There were some noticeable gaps that were mentioned. And then echoing what Jawanza said about businesses, but then we also discussed if these schools are close to recreation centers, what opportunities exist. And then if there are facilities that are being either phased out or potentially modernized, the potential for those to become neighborhood hubs and function as rec centers, because the building is there and a lot of our neighborhoods need something that's a little bit in walking distance. So those were some of the pieces. Also have a note here about technology and lab equipment. The technology is slow in the buildings, and the need for lab equipment, things that focusing on STEM related fields.
Great. Thank you very much. Anything, questions or comments for Region 2?
Oh, also, I feel like our co-chairs from Region 2 summed up the meeting pretty well.
Great.
Also, I think we had productive conversations. However, I don't think the turnout was ideal. We didn't get any students aside from myself and not many parents. And I feel like we're trying to improve Plum City schools, then we need to hear from students and parents. I feel like that's very essential.
I completely agree. And we've had some conversations. I don't feel comfortable right now unveiling what our plan is, but we saw that as an issue over the course of the 6 meetings. And we are discussing on how we can interact. And one of the ideas, and we're going to go through details, but what if our team picks one of the schools that we come and just have a conversation, or you get to talk to us. So
Yes.
these are, we definitely thought that this forum from a student aspect could possibly be a little challenging. I mean, there's a lot of boxes and a lot of faces, and it not exactly, as you can tell by my stuttering right now, can seem to not be the most comfortable environment to talk about what's bothering you. So we understand that that's a challenge, and I truly appreciate you bringing that up, because we know we need to address that moving forward, and that's from all 6 regions. So thank you.
And I can tell you that's a very serious commitment. That's very important that we hear everyone's voice. So thank you for bringing that up.
Okay. On to Region 3. So quick recap. Juwanza, you brought up something that Region 3 brought up, but in a little bit different caveat, because they were talking about using the pathways to have local organizations that help facilitate from young to, whether it be an internship or part of the curriculum, but they brought it on to, I believe probably because of the people's professions, but into like nursing or OSU. So I mean, those are major international resources we have in our backyard. Why not integrate some of our curriculum along with that? So I thought
I've said that for a long time. We have enough businesses from Nationwide to State Farm to a lot of the businesses downtown. Even if each one of those businesses adopted one school, that's enough that could change a school right within inside of a year immediately.
Yeah, it's a fabulous idea. But since you said it, I had to give you some credit. And then just going through, trying to be as quick as we can. Again, going through the flexibility, connections, community, ESL, the vertical alignments, the diversity and technology at each school, so that there are these different components and these different avenues of getting involved in different technology, but it's not consistent from school to school. So people would have to choose of where they get access to some of these different things. And how do we want to have that school of choice when it comes to educational resources like that? Okay. And then a lot of what we talked about. And so again, I'm trying to keep my recap short so I can we get to every group, and then the co-chairs have more time than listening to my blabbering. So co-chairs for Region 3.
I can start. Hey everyone, this is Mike Alcock. I'm one of the co-chairs for Region 3. Dennis, you covered some of the points that I think we heard at our meeting. A lot of the common pros were very nimble, flexible, almost to a point of perhaps being overly nimble staff, given the past year that we've had. They've been through a lot, and that really came out in the discussion. Incredibly strong relationships built with students. Heard some very personal stories about teachers talking about just how much they've forged relationships with students in new ways over the past year. Lots of updated tech starting to creep into the buildings, but also now with COVID that are starting to find their ways into students' homes, and the collaboration happening between teachers and students remotely. They really want to see more of that. And then just the community support, that was a common theme across all the breakouts that I attended, but then also the report outs. Just tons of schools in Region 3, many are seen as community hubs. And once again, not to beat a dead horse, but the past year has only accentuated and underscored just how much those schools serve as the central point in the community for social services, medical services, gathering, really seen as a central resource in the community. I'll say too, I guess the big common challenge that I heard was just lack of equity across the board. I mean, you name it, and it came up in the discussions. Facilities were mentioned in particular, but I heard a lot in terms of access to services, the quality of services, and we're talking about, in some cases, basic student and family services, but also, more enhanced ones as well. I would say for me that was the most common challenge that we heard, was just a basic lack of equity.
Julia Lynn Walker, the other co-chair for Region 3, and briefly, without repeating a lot of what's gone before, I'm going to highlight a couple of points. And one is that there seemed to be a certain amount of frustration as to whether or not whatever decisions are currently being made will be maintained for the long haul. So people were just concerned about, we make decisions today, will there be a flip-flop, and will there be new decisions a week from today, and then a month from today, some other decisions. So there was a need for some reassurance that things would continue as they were. And then secondly, there was discussion in terms of the corporate culture, working with students and staff to really negotiate these new relationships because of COVID and the use of the building. And there was one quote in particular that stood out, and a parent said, will the teachers help the children learn how to play again? And that really resonated with me in terms of, yes, they do have to know how to use the equipment, how to use the space, how to relate to each other, with their traditional methods of play. And so it just reaffirmed for me, but there are a number of layers, within this corporate culture that will have to be negotiated in light of COVID-19. And then finally, there was a concern that the buildings themselves are actually physically unsafe. There was a question of just, real danger, either because there was a lack of glass, or the glass is a long way, or the door is the other way, or there was some configuration because of the physical structure that led staff to believe that there was some a question of safety for themselves. So I'll stop there and affirm the other comments for Region 3.
Thank you so much. Truly appreciate that. Have anybody else from Region 3? Okay. Shift my notes here. All right. Region 4. Some of the notes that I've gotten specifically were that in Region 4 that they were proud of the updated historic buildings and the proximity to community amenities. There was mentioned previously about creating neighborhood hubs or connectivity amongst the neighborhood. That's just something that was discussed. Two words that stuck out in my listening to Region 4 was the words human connection. And I think this goes back to the idea of playing again. The fact that we've been in isolation, and just that the fact of the importance of human connection, and what does that look like? Or what does that feel like as we move forward? I think it was meant to be more of, we understand the importance of this now. How do we do it? How do we take our schools and our curriculum and exemplify that? There was some concerns in Region 4 about the building sizes, program availability and service availability was a positive, but again, just the equity from top to bottom. Mentioned about high student retention. So that was something that caught my eye and caught my ear for Region 4. And there were one of the groups, was group 15 in our discussion that specifically that went in towards, since I think they were later in the conversation, going into more of what we call the envision, and then just having the space for counselors, a staff lounge. We talked about the calming spaces for students and teachers, project-based learning, ADA accessibility came up here, and then the challenges of transportation. And then there were some physical attributes to the building that were discussed as well, windows and roofs and whatnot. And there was one comment, and again, it was a comment. So this is something that I would like to, but just, there was one, I wrote it down and I knew it was just said that there's the amount of programs is not equitable to the number of high schools. So how do we create a little more equity with that? And then regarding forecasting enrollment and then some interesting ideas of recycling and nature, of how we can integrate these things into our buildings. So with that, Region 4.
Thank you. One of the things that did come up a lot was people love our staff and our teachers here, but there also is a lot of inequality in the quality of the buildings. There are a lot of old buildings that have had some updating, but still have basically very old infrastructure to them. There was one group that talked that got a little bit ahead of itself, but it talked about how it thought the high schools were too small and that the district is forcing 13 and 14-year-olds to make lifelong specialization decisions when they decide which high school to go to. And that's partly because the buildings are so small, you don't have a variety of programs, so you have to pick very carefully where you want to go. There are a lot of people talked about crowded elementary schools. We keep shuffling people back and kindergartners back and forth between elementary schools, and it's getting more and more difficult to do that. I mean, it's becoming more difficult. And I know people are now, I hear people talking about how they're getting their kids in pre-K specifically because they want to be first in line to get into one of the elementary schools. That's why they're taking up pre-K spots wherever they can go, because they know that's how the system works. I did hear one interesting, two interesting concepts that are in tension. Some people talked about that we needed to have more parking available so that families could go to the schools, but other people wanted more green space. I think one thing we probably need to have discussions with the community on is where is that balance? Because sometimes you can accommodate both, but a lot of times we're going to be making a decision. The bigger the parking lot, the less green space is. There's just so much acreage and you have to decide where it goes. And I think we need to have some deliberate conversations with the community on that. And there's just one note, there are some people who are specifically concerned with the quality, what we're being able to provide for the medically fragile kids at Coleraine. They love that school, but it's one of the older buildings, and it's also one of the buildings where the kids who attend that school need the space, need the updates probably more than any of the other kids in this region do. That's my report. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tom Knosman. I was the other co-chair. And some of the things that I had talked to people about were maybe just the inefficient, having so many school buildings. How do we upgrade all these? Is it worth upgrading? Before school care and after school care, there's so many people that need to get to work early or can't get back after school, and to have something for them would be great. Modern playgrounds for our elementary schools. A lot of our elementary schools I know have shared gyms and lunchrooms. That just doesn't work. I mean, They need to have big play spaces, especially for winter time when you can't get outside. The kids need to get it and run around. And you can't do that when people are having lunch at that same time. And they're also being used, shared libraries and music spaces. Libraries need to be libraries, and there needs to be a designated music space for kids as well. When it's a shared space, it's just some of our older buildings, that's all we can do. Going forward, it'd be great to have those separate spaces. Computer labs with a lot of STEM technology, mobile, as well as a designated room for that is something that people are very passionate about. Conference rooms for teachers to be able to work with students individually when they need to, and specialists as well. The parking concerns, like Steve said, access for disabilities. They might be basic, but a lot of these older buildings are not set up for that, and that's not fair. It'd be great to have some sort of relationship with the park services, as well. If we're changing things up in the future, maybe we can back a school up to a park service and work with them. There's something I think that we can do with that. And ESL is definitely something that's strong in our community, and people are proud of as well. So it's just, there's many different buildings. There's a few elementary schools that have been completely redone and are ideal, and there's a lot that are not, and as well as high schools. So equity across is something I think, everybody wants that. And I think larger schools, I think, so that you have more opportunities across the board to compare with the Dublins, the Upper Arlingtons, the Olentangies. I want our kids staying here. I don't want families moving out because that's what they can get there. I want them to have the same opportunities here, and small schools here and there are not going to accommodate all the programs that we need for our kids and our kids deserve. That's all.
Thank you very much. Anything else from Region 4?
Just one last thing. Someone did, at the end, was pointing out that it might be helpful to more frequently give out the email address that people can send in comments to, so that they understand what the communications strategy is, and also so that they understand that they may not get personalized email responses, but that the district is going to put together an FAQ based on the questions asked. I think that kind of transparency would go a long way.
Yes, and that definitely is not going on deaf ears. We are putting together, I'm putting together a summary of the process, and then any of the questions received is along with an FAQ. So those documents are underway, and on that document, I'll make sure that that email address is big and bold. Okay. All right. Then we are on to Region 1. So the Region 1, some of the, I'm trying to not be repetitive, and I want to give most of my time to the co-chairs. Actually, something that was very intriguing for me for Region 1 was the idea of how do we accommodate in communication and education for a term that I love to hear, which was called New Americans. Why is this a new term to me? I don't know, but the fact that I know it now, I'm just so excited. So the fact of that, we understand that our community is in major transition right now, and we have people that aren't from here, Jim, you and I. But from a standpoint outside of being new to Columbus, but being new to the United States, I think is a very interesting perspective. And how do we accommodate those folks? And then the idea of trauma-informed practices into daily practices. So instead of having to always react, how can we plan for the idea of, okay, here's our situation. where are we going? Is it immediate lockdown, or just the idea that and again, it was more societal, but just the discussion of, as a school, we had to react to this thing and shut down. What can we do so we don't have to shut down? I thought it was a very interesting point to bring up. Talked about natural light, talked about some of the aging buildings. Idea of the sensory spaces, but getting a little more detail in regards to color and knowing that there's sensory reactions, triggers, and a lot of the, again, just the back to the community, and that embracing diversity was something that everybody talked about. So with that, Region 1.
Hello. Some of the things that we talked about, building on what you said with the color therapy. One of the consistent themes that came up from some of the breakout rooms was designing buildings and using color schemes to make them not look like institutions and prisons. That was something that was brought up across the board from all of the breakout groups, and also designing the school buildings and spaces to be open and welcoming to the surrounding environment. One of the other, the disparity between the different regions of the district. There was a lot of discussion where the Region 1 residents felt as if the West Side was being left out of the facilities investment process. Speaking specifically on some of their older historical buildings, such as West High School, the modern design of Briggs High School. There was just a lot of questions with the high schools and being left out of the design. The elementary schools, Ben's Elementary, just was applauded for the way the building is designed, how welcoming it is, how open it is. And they would like to see more, I guess, thoughtful design similar to that in welcoming spaces. And it was basically say they were very cheerful, and brings a certain amount of energy into the way those spaces were designed. They like to see more of that on the West Side. Also, another thing that was brought up was incorporating businesses in the corporate community, specifically building trades on that side of town, using some of our aging buildings as training spaces. So as buildings are upgraded and work is done, we use some of our programming in the building trades to work alongside creating an apprenticeship type of programs in some of our aging buildings, where we update to a certain point and have students actually working on those spaces. So they get real world training along with the academic side of the training. So they are more accelerated when they graduate from the programs. Some other things that we talked about, of course, was the diversity and inclusion with our New American communities. We have over in the Wedgwood area, we have a lot of New Americans over there. So programming, design of buildings to create that welcoming space for them was something that was brought up. Again, the equity in transportation and the ADA compliance in some of our facilities. And then also in neighborhoods where the schools have been there for decades, the situation with the bus pickup and drop off. And existing facilities, I don't know how you begin to address that, but there is a complete jam and backup in most of our aging facilities, just because the neighborhood has grown around it. And the bus pickup, drop off, the walking situation with the lack of sidewalks and students walking directly in the streets, having to navigate between cars, between buses. And it's very difficult for the students, especially our elementary students, to navigate those zones without having some kind of help or some type of guidance. On the West Side, that is a really big issue. And I think that's basically all, because everything else has been touched on. But the schools and the color therapy looking like institutions was brought up a lot.
To add to our region, I had a conversation with one of the administrators at my school in the breakout room, and my co-chair touched on it, but like a welcoming environment. He wants to be able to hold events at the school to bring in more community engagement. Also, I talked to a few parents and they were asking, how can we add outdoor trailers, pods, that type of building for kids with special needs and sensory needs, so they can be out the building and have a place to be out of a busy building. And also, how can we bring career tech programs back into the school and have buildings to hold those programs? And yeah, that's pretty much it.
I'd like to add one more thing that we touched on, was having a BizTown type of incubator space, kind of similar to BizTown and the Idea Foundry, with some of our vacant buildings where students under the guidance of teachers can learn how to launch a business, learn how that you have to plan for owning real estate, paying taxes, having a physical space where students are kind of guided through the process of launching their own business. So students who have ideas for businesses would be able to use some of our vacant space. The district will have that as a small business incubator, so the students could actually launch their business, kind of learn the ins and outs, grow, fail, stand again before they go out into the real world, using some of our vacant buildings for that type of space. That was another thing that was brought up. Thank you, Sinai.
Thank you very much. That was great. Appreciate it very much. All right. And on to Region 6. Okay, from a programming aspect, there was talking about the some of the partnerships and the feeder programs and interdisciplinary. And again, just the idea of the consistency throughout, meaning from whether the pathway is from this building to this building and however it's designated, but making it consistent so that if you are part of a feeder plan or an acceleration plan, that you can lay out where you're going to be, that you don't have to apply from one school to the next. Gender neutral bathrooms for privacy was something that stuck out with this group. STEM and STEAM schools, if that you have them, then yes, if you have a STEM or STEAM program within your school, that's fantastic that you're embracing the change in curriculum. But to just say you're making this room a STEM or a STEAM room without the proper infrastructure makes the program a challenge. So how do we address those issues? So if you're going to associate a certain program with a certain facility, and we just need to make sure that the infrastructure in that facility can support that program. Talked about ADA. Again, reflecting the cultures of the students. So a lot of these buildings, because they were built in the 1950s or 60s, they don't really reflect an image of diversity that the district now represents. So how can we embrace the diversity that is there when you're in the building, and how can you have someone that comes into the district from all these different cultures feel welcome and excited to learn? So that was, and I definitely something that came up with this group. Cross-corp curriculum. Art and music should not be shared. I know this is something that we've talked about before, that those deserve their own spaces so we can add more flexibility. Okay. With that, Region 6.
Good evening. A lot of reoccurring things that you already said, Dennis. ADA compliance was one of those things that really mean a lot to me, Dr. Dixon and President Adair, as I have a kindergartner at Huey Elementary. And I am worried about when 6th grade happens, where do we go? And will that ADA compliance follow us there? So that stuck out to me as I listened to our YouTube conversations. Also, a lot of schools in Region 6 sit in a food desert. So there was discussions about duplicating the agriculture program that is at Lyndon McKinley STEM. And as a lot of us are talking about food as medication, that resonated with me as well. Finally, for me, it was creating a space where we can look at our kids' social and emotional needs and look at them as individuals. And then again, having a child with multiple disabilities, what also stood out to me is creating a space for our teachers to be able to ground themselves so that they can be 100% for those students. So as we think about, yes, this space for the students, but also not forgetting that our teachers and our educators are people, and life in 2020 and 2021 is happening to them. So how do we support their self-care? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from Region 6?
I'd like to jump on. Those of you who've been in our elementary buildings, I forget exactly the term, but I think it's something like cafegimatorium, where it's a combined space, and especially the barrier being at some of our arts integrated schools needing to have separate performance spaces, because that's a big part. If dance is part of the curriculum, they should have a suitable place to perform for families. And that's also, a method of sharing the curriculum that's taking place, because it's truly integrated with their core studies as well. And I know ADA has come up a lot, and it's not just in terms of accessibility for students, which is obviously really important, but Region 6 talked about accessibility for families to be able to come in and be engaged, and also community volunteers who may require ADA accommodations, making sure that they can come in and participate and volunteer in buildings as well and contribute, but still have safe spaces to do that. And I'm not sure if it was already mentioned, but I think this connects really well with the Portrait of a Graduate, especially when it comes to creativity, making sure that we have space for collaborative seating and maybe flexible seating or a type of maker space for students. Thank you.
Hello,
I
I
just
do
say
want to
something
add.
as a,
Oh,
go ahead,
go ahead.
Carl,
Yes,
you're
go
good.
ahead.
As a participant, because I was group 6, it was really refreshing to have educators that dealt with children with special needs. The bigger piece as far as facilities was Lyndon McKinley. We invested quite a bit of money into adding on to Lyndon McKinley, but the old structure has some major concerns. They talked about the mold, the mildew, the crack where you can see into the locker room. Some bathrooms and locker rooms are used as storage spaces. So when we're thinking about facilities for the future, make sure that we have space as they grow. And if it's going to be added onto an existing structure, that we make sure that that structure is also up to code and where it needs to be, so that it's a fluid process when the kids are going through. So they're not in the new part of the school, so to speak, and then they have to go to like the dungeon to do something else. So that was brought up. And they also talked about being able to compete with the suburban schools, and the private schools and the charter schools, being able to have everything under one roof that would attract students back into the district, as opposed to them going and their parents choosing another option.
Hello, everyone. Carl Moore, student at Columbus Downtown and Lyndon McKinley. And I just wanted to add that I wasn't able to be there in person, but I did go back and watch the video due to work-related reasons. But I did notice that some pros was the successful things that happened in Region 6 was the teachers teaching with compassion, and also the community members that we have. We have a lot of community members in the Region 6. Then some cons was lack of, as other regions stated, lack of transportation, lack of HVAC, and the need for social and emotional focus and safe rooms for student staffs. Of course, the necessarily building renovations that need to be made, and also in Region 6, as other regions stated.
Thank you very, very much. All right, everyone, your input. If you think about what we all just talked about, we are laying the groundwork for the design of Columbus City Schools. So I don't know how, but that's really amazing. That's what we're doing right now, is that we're starting off figuring out issues that we know we can solve and we know we can address, but we don't know what they are until we talk about it. So we are starting the foundations of how we're going to design what these schools look like. And so I don't mean to oversell it or but that's what we're doing. That's what this process is. So everything that you've said here, this is part of the record. So when we start laying out when we start designing concepts, or you start designing concepts, I'm there just to help answer questions. But when you start designing concepts and I'm there to put the pictures together for you, we go back to these. Why did you put at that school? Why did you put a gym there? Well, remember in our group meetings, we didn't like the idea that the music and the art is sharing that space. That was something that was, and so we have that transparency. So again, I don't mean to overemphasize the steps and the meticulous nature of the process, but I promise you, all of this stuff will come back to these discussions. So I know if I were you, I'd be tired of hearing from me, but I have one more item on the agenda, and that is preview for the next phase. And what we are going to do is, in the survey that's going to be issued very shortly, within the next, I'll say 4 to 5 days, we are going to be attaching some videos and some imagery. My team's put a lot of images together, not just as random eye candy, but we are associating it with the themes of the Portrait of a Graduate. But we're going to take it 3 steps or 3 portions at a time. So there are items such as creativity and global empathy that we know we can encapsulate in the envision phase of getting some idea, what does that look like? And then the define phase, when we talk about technology, is we can quantify that and where do we put it at school X. So with the idea of envision is, now that we've discussed the challenges but how we can enhance what is what is working, I come back to you, and that we have a few minutes, because I would like to have some parting words from our leadership before we dismiss tonight. But something that when we had our initial boot camp early March, that there was a question raised to us of where did the survey questions come from? And that is more than a fair question. So if there are any ideas of what do you want to ask in the survey? What are questions when you think of hopes and dreams of where you see these facilities, and what do they look like? What do they act like? What do they do? How do you want to ask these questions? So again, we don't need, you can email them to the website. You can tell me, you can jump in now, you can put it in the chat. You can, however, and again, I don't mean to put you on the spot, because we haven't released the survey yet. And I intentionally did not want to do that. We did not want to do that without approaching you first. So with that, I conclude my portion of the presentation. And Jim, if you would like to have anything, or Dr. Dixon or President Adair, I don't know how to conclude it. So
That's okay. Yep.
Throwing it out.
Thank you. Yep. Thanks, Dennis. First, Dr. Dixon, President Adair, any?
Yeah, thank you. I would just want to say thank you to all of our participants. I love it when I hear from our students. They always rise to the occasion and they represent us so well each and every time. And a couple of them were here on some meetings I had earlier today. So it's good to see you here with us again. I want to keep challenging us, right? As we build this, we have to be able to then take information back to the broader community. And so I'm hoping that Dennis and the team are capturing this and putting it in some type of written form so that people hear what each group have told us tonight, right? That information should be in written form. I think that's your next step, Dennis. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of those notes captured, and we send those out, and then we maybe get some additional reactions to that, right? Because some people that maybe could not have participated, I know a couple of students said we needed more participation. Just remember, we service almost 50,000 students, which equals almost 30,000 families, adults. So we want to all, and be mindful that we have to keep asking people to react to this information because it is for our students of the future. We have many students that are here now, but by the time this approval process comes, it will be the little babies that will really have an opportunity to learn and thrive in these buildings that we are creating and thinking about right now. So again, thank you for your time and your commitment and pushing and challenging us. And I just know that we're going to take some additional necessary steps to make sure that we are taking this information back to the broader community. And so we'll see some more steps in between that time before we go to the final phase, the next phase, just to make sure that we've captured the thoughts and the thoughts of other stakeholders. So I appreciate all the co-chairs. You guys are rocking. You guys are getting that information. You're out in the community, just as we design. And I'm just looking for more, looking forward to hearing about our next steps. President Adair?
Yeah, I agree with that. I want to, again, thank you for being out there in the community, really collecting this really great data. One thing that I was really tuned into this evening was to hear from the different regions to kind of see what was trending, what was going on, what might be a district issue or regional issue, which to me is a question of equity. I think you all did really well at talking about what some of the current problems are, but then really getting and pushing towards the vision. I heard some really exciting things that the community was already talking about. I also want to make sure that you feel supported as the co-chairs, because you are out there and you're kind of our voice right now, right? You're the conduit between the community and the district. And if there's anything that you need or any additional information, please don't hesitate to reach out. We really want to let you know that we appreciate you and that you have everything you need in order to do the things that we have asked you to do. Thank you for those that I heard some of you say, and I talked to extra people and I went and did this. Thank you for that extra, because that's why you were chosen, right? You all do have very special connections to the community. We are very much trying to get all aspects. And I heard some of you talk about business and faith and nonprofits. That's exactly what we're looking for. So just keep up the great work. And like Dr. Dixon said, I look forward to seeing a little bit more data on paper as we start to kind of collectively understand the needs of our district so that we can build to the future. So thank you all so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, President Adair, and also Dr. Dixon. And honestly, I do want to call out the student ambassadors. And the reason I want to call out the student ambassadors is to those young, bright minds that are going to be our future leaders. one influential person that coined the phrase was Stephen Covey, someone who his books really impacted me. And he said leadership is a choice, not a position. So it's not a position you hold or a title, it's the actions you take. And just by your activity and your willingness and courage to step up, be involved, and then voice the comments that you heard really speaks to the leadership quality that exists inside you. So thank you again for that from the bottom of my heart. And then also co-chairs, the regional co-chairs, this is, to me, this was really powerful because you get a chance as a community, like you, I'm a volunteer, so I get to hear it. You stepped up, brought really good comments that are going to be, as Dr. Dixon said and Dennis committed to, we're going to record all of that in a written form. The written word is powerful. We all could, the written word does not go away. And the record of everything that we talked about will then become the foundation for which we build this plan on. So thank you, everyone, for, your openness, your candor, your professionalism, and, helping us stretch a little bit. So with that, we will adjourn our meeting. So can I get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Okay, second.
Second that.
Okay, buenas noches.
Buenas noches.